Hello, this video is about corpus linguistics and COCA. COCA is the corpus that we're going to use in my class, and there'll be a second video that talks specifically about that. But before we get into that, let's talk about what a corpus is and what it helps you search for. And a COCA is not the soda. Okay, it stands for something else. We'll talk about that later. So a corpus, or the plural is corpora, comes from the Latin for body. So in English, we have this word corpse that derives from the same word or descends from the same word. It's basically a large collection of samples of language. And they're very often from a particular genre or a particular period or something like that, usually because we want to investigate the language used from that particular genre, like, science fiction or something, or from that particular period, say the 1860s or something like that. And that's a corpus. So the corpus is the body of data, and then we use a software tool to search the corpus. That means search, I guess. Um, so sort of like Google searches the internet for finding particular things that you're looking for. A concordancer searches the corpus for particular words or phrases that you're looking for, or particular patterns in the language. And this can help you search for a wide variety of things, and it's very useful that we have computers to do this with. If you imagine a library, for example, as your corpus, so it's just a big collection of text, and you wanted to see how often the word engineer was used as a verb as compared to engineer as a noun, like a person is an engineer, you would have to read every book and then highlight all the engineers and then decide whether that was a noun or verb, and have a checklist where you see how many of each one you found. That would be incredibly time consuming, and software lets us do this with the power of computing much quicker. Just a couple milliseconds on the internet. Okay, so that's what a corpus is. And let me show you some concepts for linguistics that will help you understand what we're looking for when we use a corpus. Grammaticality is I'm introducing this as a contrast. So grammaticality is usually not what we're looking for when we use a corpus, but it's something that you understand already because we've already had a unit on syntax. Grammaticality just means whether something follows the rules of English grammar or doesn't, or whatever, the grammar of the language that it's in or not. So we have here an example of a grammatical sentence that follows the rules, but it's still nonsense because the ideas in here are self-contradictory, and it's hard to take any identifiable meaning from it. Although it clearly follows the rules of grammar, there's some adjectives, and the noun is after the adjectives. There's a verb, so that verb agrees with the noun ideas as the subject. And curiously, there's an adverb. So adverbs in English can come at the end of a sentence. They can come at the beginning. They can come in some other places. But I just mean to say this is a grammatical sentence, although it's still nonsense, right? So sentences can be grammatical and still make no sense and still be something that no one would ever actually say. The new term that I want to introduce is collocation, and this measures something very different from grammaticality. Is which words are most likely to appear in certain contexts. Context meaning among certain other words. So if we have the word big, for example, and the word dog, I think we can agree we've heard that adjective applied to that noun many times in our lives. And big can apply to a great many nouns, right? Any noun, actually. According to the rules of grammar, you could have a big computer, right? You can have a big head. I'm looking at my own face right now, and I'm getting kind of self-conscious about that. You could have a big space. Sure, why not, right? You could have a big star. Sure, in some contexts that makes sense, right? Contexts that makes sense. What would it mean though to have a big grandmother? That's not as commonly used after big, and you sort of have to stretch your imagination to figure out what the speaker might be trying to say by that, right? Or a big happiness, right? Happiness is not usually we think of as having three-dimensional proportions, so it's strange to see that adjective applied to that noun. Although happiness is a noun, so it can apply to it. It's not a good collocation. Collocation would say that the most likely words after big would tend to be three-dimensional objects or living things. Um, And conversely, if we have a living thing, there are certain adjectives that are more likely to be applied to it, although technically any adjective could, right? You could have a big dog or a small dog or a cute dog, and you're not likely to have an abstract dog, although that's still an adjective. It can apply to a noun. It's not a good collocation, though, because it doesn't often come there. So collocation is the tendency of certain words to come together, right? So in this space before ideas, we could have any adjective, right? We could technically have any verb after the adjective, after the subject, ideas. But some are much more likely than others, and some will mark you out as a fluent speaker of the language or a non fluent speaker of the language if you know which ones people are used to hearing in a particular context. So, before ideas, you could have beneficent ideas. That's much less common than good ideas, right? After ideas, a verb could be near, and near, first of all, is uncommon as a verb to begin with. Like you would say, dawn nears, right? Or the winter nears. It strikes me as kind of literary sounding. It is a verb, it's just not that common. Um, and then come is much more common, and then especially after ideas, right? Good ideas come to those who wait, or something like that, right? So these are not technically more correct than near or beneficent, but they are much more common, and they're much more what fluent speakers are used to hearing, right? So an analogy that I like to use, and I use this with my English students too, is that a lion is a carnivore. A lion can eat any kind of meat besides kinds that are toxic or poisonous. So it could eat a turkey, right? Lions can eat turkeys, probably. They don't occur in the wild together, but if a lion for some reason found a turkey, it could eat it. A lion could also eat a cow. I mean, cows are basically bioengineered through artificial selection to provide meat, and I'm pretty sure in zoos that is what they eat, right? But when you think of a lion and you think of like a lion in the wild on a nature show, a lion is not eating a cow or a turkey, it's probably eating a gazelle or a zebra or something else. And so what this example is meant to illustrate is that anything could come here technically, but there are some things that we're used to seeing among other things. And with lions, it's zebras and gazelles. With ideas, it's verbs like come or occur, not verbs like require or verbs like near, right? So that's my analogy for collocation. A related concept to collocation is markedness. This is a term you'll hear not only in linguistics but in social science too. Marked just means things that don't fit naturally well together, and naturally well together means what people expect. And it's sort of a circular definition because you wonder why the people expect a certain thing there, but whatever they expect there, if you don't give them what they expect, then it's going to be marked. So marked means basically unusual or not following the normal way. You will definitely notice if you ever try to learn a foreign language that collocations and markedness are one of the key stumbling blocks once you move past the stage of being basically competent in grammar. Like I know, you can comer comida in Spanish, you eat food, but I don't know which verbs most commonly come with comida, and maybe it's comer, or maybe it's something like the equivalent of have, because in English we say you have lunch, right? And until I master this, I will never sound normal to a Spanish speaker. And of course, Spanish speakers from different places will have different ideas of what is common and what is marked. Anyway, so an example of markedness from another genre might be a kiwi, right? A kiwi doesn't have any of the characteristics we think of as belonging to birds, besides the fact that it does belong in the same, is it a family, biologically. So when we say, oh, there's a bird, and someone turns over and looks and it's a kiwi, they might think, what? Oh, yeah, okay, I guess you're right. That's what markedness is similar to from other genres, from other fields of inquiry. So a kiwi is a marked type of bird. It's unusual. And we'll learn more about that in the future, that phenomenon of not belonging exactly to a particular class later on in the semester. In linguistics, So this example sentence, every morning before class I do a shower, that verb do is marked. And again, this is different from grammaticality. This is a bad collocation. It's not bad grammar because that person does have a verb there, right? It's just not the verb that people usually use before shower. They usually say take or maybe have, but definitely not do. Those kinds of verbs, what we call the light verbs in English, like take or make or do or play, the collocations around those are very hard for people to learn. Like, why do you take a shower but have lunch? And you can take lunch if it's a break at work, but otherwise, when you're at home and you say, I'm going to make a sandwich, then you're having lunch. That's so bizarre and hard for people to learn. But anyway, if you use the wrong one, it's marked. It's unusual. So at Cedar City, there are many stores in Main Street. Now imagine you were trying to explain to someone why at is the wrong preposition and in is the wrong preposition in this sentence. Um, we know instinctually, without it having to be taught to us if we are fluent speakers, or maybe it was taught to us if we're fluent from learning English, but um, that cities use the preposition in, states use in, countries use in, but streets use at. Or, sorry, no, they use on. Streets use on. Um, and using the wrong preposition there doesn't change the meaning because Cedar City is still a city and Main Street is still definitely a street. But it's the wrong preposition for reasons that are not clear to most people. Two more concepts before we end the first half of this series. Um, One is a chunk. I used that word on the last slide, but here I'm going to explain what it is. A chunk is just words that travel together so often that you could basically think of them as one unit of meaning. And it's different from an idiom that we'll get to next, but a chunk is a certain sequence of words that's used so often that you could learn it as one unit, and in your mind it may exist as like one word. So whenever you walk into Walmart, for example, they say help you or help you. It sounds like melp you, but it's may I help you, right? Um, that's a chunk that they learn as part of their customer service training, I suppose, but they learn it as one set. They don't change any of the words in there. Those words travel together almost like, you know, Starsky and Hutch or Tom and Jerry or any other famous duo, Harry and Hermione, you know. Um, and what's unique about a chunk compared to the next word on this slide is that when it comes to chunks, if you look at the individual words, you can still guess the meaning if you know all the individual words and the grammar that links them together, right? So, may I help you? If you understand each of those words individually, you can understand the chunk. Now, you won't necessarily know that that is what you have to say when someone walks in the doors at Walmart. It has a unique sort of existence as a very high frequency phrase. But if you know all those words, you can understand it when someone says it to you. Like if you're an alien who comes to Earth knowing English but not knowing how anyone actually speaks it, you can understand a chunk. An idiom is not that way. An idiom is a group of words who travel together and take on a unique meaning that is not derivable from the individual words in it. Okay? So an idiom is defined by what we call idiomaticity. That means it's when you break it down, it appears to be made up of different parts than when you put it back together again. So give up is an example of this because give up technically has two words in it, but if you understand give and you understand up, you still don't understand give up, right? Give up doesn't mean any kind of giving. Could care less is another example. And this one is I don't know, maybe a little bit controversial, but it's an idiom because you can't tell what it means by looking at all the words individually. You could probably do this for couldn't care less, which is another way of saying this, but you can't do it for could care less. Could care less basically means you don't care, right? And it's an idiom because if you look at the words that make it up, you don't get that. You don't get that meaning from it, but that's what it means. Okay, so there are a lot of idioms in English. Well, this is another topic where if you're a language learner, it's very, very hard to get used to this idea that these two words separately mean something, but when you put them together and use them in a certain context, they mean something totally different. Anyway, so those are some things that you might look for when you are using a corpus, as we'll see in the next video. So enjoy.